What does acquiring information and going down to the local Tesco have in common? In both cases, the things that we're acquiring are being packaged and presented to us in a certain way. When we think of information and knowledge, that evokes bookish feelings. But in actual fact, information is being sold to us in a not dissimilar way to the way that crisps and junk food and chocolate bars are being marketed to us in a shop. They're being packaged and presented to seem more palatable, more appealing, to stimulate all sorts of emotional feelings about the information that we're being given in order to bias us towards it, irrespective of whether or not it's actually good for us. This is a mind control technique known as mystical manipulation. And what would happen in the ancient world is, and it still happens today in some forms, is a person would claim to have magical powers or to be a mystic, to be in contact with some higher being, and they would use trickery in order to convince people that they had some special insight. For example, in some cults, they would have a person stand underneath the ground in a secret chamber up to the neck, around which they would put blood and gore, and the person would pretend to be a severed head on the surface of the chamber. And acolytes to the cult would be brought in, and they would miraculously see the head come to life and start answering their questions. Obviously, this had the effect of massively favouring people towards the idea that the cult had some secret knowledge to share with them. So, how does this relate to the modern day? Well, there are still some charlatans who pretend to be in contact with, for example, the dead. We hear about instances when clairvoyants have had microphones in their ears and they've been pretending to speak with relatives in the audience while receiving information about the people who've turned up there from a third party. But it's happening in newspapers, it's happening on television, it's happening whenever certain news is completely ignored and other news is given very emotive treatment, is given very somber language and is presented with heavy sentiment, while at the same time other bits of information are being ignored completely. So this is a mystical manipulation, and one of the most insidious things about it is the effect that it has on the mind of the person being manipulated. Because once we attribute to a source, whether that source be another person, whether it be a particular newspaper, a group of people, a television channel, or a religious or political organisation that we belong to, once we think of that group or source as being orthodox, which is to say it has the absolute truth and every piece of the puzzle, then something occurs within ourselves, and that is we start to police our own questions and doubts. Because somebody who doesn't believe in the information given by the talking severed head, well, that must be down to some deficit in them. If you don't believe that the prophet is telling you the word of God, well, that must be down to your failing. It can never be located within the source. So when we think about mystical manipulation, we're looking at special treatment being given to the presentation of some information. The idea that this source of information is unquestionable, that it has the right view, the right attitudes, that we must adopt them. And the knock-on effect is that we decide that anyone, whether it be ourselves or anyone else, who questions that narrative must be doing it for the most basest reasons and guilty of some kind of wrong think.